Sometimes it's possible that a preacher can become overly excited, or he can get overzealous in his preaching. And sometimes preachers are just like anybody else. They're just like you. You're just like the rest of us. Sometimes we exaggerate, and sometimes, that's dangerous. When we're teaching or preaching, we need to be careful about exaggerations, about getting in the flesh and saying something in the wrong way, because it can be taken the wrong way, and it can make a lasting impact on people that hear us, especially young people. We need to be careful that we preach the truth, that we teach the truth, because we never know what they're going to hang on to when they leave that day after we've taught. But I want to read you one, for instance, here out of the Word of God of something like that happening. And the disciples, the Lord called His disciples, and they started following Him, and He began teaching them. But a lot of things they had to unlearn before He could really help them to learn the truth. And I want to show you an example here in John chapter number 9 and verse number 1. And as Jesus passed by, He saw a man which was blind from his birth. And His disciples asked Him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I want you to notice something. They saw a man that was blind. They saw a man that was blind, and obviously if he was blind from birth, people around there knew that. And Jews that had seen him year by year going into the temple, they would have seen him yearly. He was born blind. They would have known him if he grew up there all his life blind. He would have been known to the whole city. Well, I want you to think about this. They looked at him, and they saw something in his life that was to them a terrible, tragic thing. He was blind. What a terrible thing to have to live with. And automatically they think, well, he's blind because he did something. This is judgment. God has judged him for something. And not only were they hypocritical in this is an example of hypocritical judgment. They looked unfairly at this man and made a hypocritical judgment. They're thinking, they turned to the Lord Himself and said, who did sin, this man or his parents? So they automatically figure that this man's problem is a result of his sin or his parents. Now, I want to ask you something. Do you think God's going to punish you for your parents' sin? No, I don't believe that. Don't believe that in no way, shape, or form. But it also wasn't a punishment for this man. It was for a purpose, yes. But I want you to think about this. Why would they have that idea? Why would they think that? They grew up learning the Scriptures. They grew up being taught the Word of God. These men were Jews. They'd grown up learning the Word of God. They were God's chosen people. They'd been taught. Well, I want you to notice something. Later on in that same chapter, when that man, he went to the pool and washed, and he went to the pool called Siloam, he washed, and he came seeing, and then he went through all of that trouble with the Pharisees, and then he went through the trouble with his parents denying him, and then they cast him out of the synagogue, and the poor thing, that he got cast out of the synagogue, and before they threw him out, he told them, he said, why, herein's a marvelous thing. He said, never, now I'm paraphrasing now, never before has a man been given his sight that was born blind. And I want you to notice what they taught, or what these teachers told him. They said, let me see. They answered and said unto him, Thou wast altogether born in sins, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out. And you see that? These men looked at that poor little old blind man, and they said, hey, you're blind because of sin. Listen, he was born blind. What kind of blind fool could teach that a child can be born blind because of his sin? That child was born blind because God had a plan. And the blindness of that child was worked into that plan. But they self-righteously looked down on him because he had a problem they didn't have. I want you to understand this. Think about this. Not everybody in the world is going to look and act like you. And you know what? If you're a child of God and you see somebody that's not acting like a Christian, hey, maybe there's a reason they're not acting like a Christian. Aren't those the people we're supposed to be trying to reach out to? Listen. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. They looked at him and said, Thou wast altogether born in sins. And Jesus said, Jesus gave him his sight back. Folks, I'm going to tell you something. We need to be careful what we teach, because those disciples of Jesus had been taught by some of these men in the synagogue that were accusing that man of being born in sin. See how that teaching, how it worked out? Those men were just going by what they'd been taught. Lord, who did sin? This man? No, they weren't being so I don't know how to put it, but they were just following what they'd been taught by a legalistic, hateful society that had cast God out of their faith. I want you to think about that. Think about that today. I hope you learned something from it. Have a good evening. God bless you. Amen.